Hello and welcome to another video or podcast, depending on whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcast player. So over the last, let's say, month and a half or so, 2 months, I've been doing a deep dive into pricing and rates for assistants, for leaders, all of that, because I overhauled my pricing structure and I've been looking at getting an assistant on board for some of my sessions. And they've also been kind of communicating with parents and families about why the prices are where they are. And the overwhelming thought is, as I've dug into this, is that the maths doesn't add up. That there is something not quite right with the maths when it comes to paying outdoor leaders to do work. So my plan for this video episode is to dive into looking at what it costs to get a forest school leader to do a forest school session for forest school day. Okay, we've switched over to the desktop view. So for all of those listening on the podcast, you'll have to do without my terrible handwriting. So we're going to approach this from the perspective of you want a forest school leader to run a session. So we're just going to go through all of the costs involved. And so we're going to start, of course, with we need a person to run the session. So if we look at minimum wage, which is due to rise to £12.21 per hour, which is for an 8-hour day. Never minding whether forest school leaders actually do just an 8-hour day. About 97.68 or so. So this is what you want to do if you employ someone. This is how much you have to pay them in minimum wage. But as we well know, employees get a certain number of benefits over someone who's self-employed. And a self-employed person has to pay all of these benefits out of their own wages. So if we actually add it all in and work out what the self-employed person would have to pay out in benefits, it comes out to another additional 15% above what a waged employee would get. So a minimum wage employee, they're paid £12.21, but they have another 15% added on top of that in terms of company benefits. So these are sick pay, holiday pay, matching of your pension contributions, all of the maternity and paternity leave, all of the rest, training, whatever. But as self-employed, you're paying your national insurance, you're accounting for sick days, holiday pay, everything else. So said it's about another 15%. So if you want a self-employed person to turn up and run a session for you, it's going to cost you about £14 per hour and about £112 for a day. Now note, this is just to get someone to turn up who basically has a pulse that can do things. So £112 is coincidentally what you would pay on average for a labourer to come and work at a building site. So someone who doesn't have any specific skills. So if what we want for a forest school is someone just to turn up who has a pulse, who isn't a criminal, then we're probably going to get the minimum wage on as a self-employed person, we're going to have to pay them £112. Now, if you do actually want your forest school leader to have some qualifications before you let them loose with tools, fire, and stuff around children, you typically want at least a forest school qualification. And most of the time, most forest school leaders will also have additional educational qualifications. So you want them to be qualified. And this typically means having least that forest school qualification, but ideally some background in child psychology and behavior management, and you want someone who will extend the learning further and will safeguard them and everything else. So if we assume that we want a qualified person, we're going to probably have to pay more for that. So we're just going to say, okay, you have an extra 15%, which will take us up to £16 an hour, which is about teacher starting salary. So a newly qualified teacher, someone who hasn't got a lot of experience in the classroom, they'll start at this about £16 per hour. I know it doesn't usually work out that way, that's just what their salary is. The expectations are far greater. So that if we look at it, it means that if we want a self-employed person who is somewhat who's reasonably qualified in the area of working with children, we're looking to pay them £128. But of course, that is just for the day. That is just to turn up on the day and run a session. If you actually want your forest school leader to prepare ahead of time, prepare some equipment, get ready for the session and not just turn up and wing it, to write up observations, to answer your emails, to have phone calls, to set things up, to put together photo albums, whatever, you're going to need on top of that a time to plan and prepare. I consider this to be another half day. For every day of sessions, you typically need a minimum of a half day in preparation time. So we're going to add in another half a day, which takes us up to 192. So essentially every forest school session needs to account for a day and a half of work, because as we know with self-employed, it's not all about the time delivering a session. That's only the tip of the iceberg. There's a whole lot that happens outside of this, and this is generous. This is I would consider the minimum. A lot of people end up operating a lot less, but as you say, if you want the time for the person running the sessions to actually properly prepare, to plan with the children in mind, to actively move them forward, then you want to make sure they have this time. And a lot of forest school leaders who are going directly private are going to spend a lot of that time marketing the sessions just to fill the spaces. So we have a qualified person who is well prepared for the day. What's the next thing we need? Well, we need insurance, and ideally first aid qualification, because you want to be insured for everything that goes wrong, so they can cover the costs if something goes horribly wrong. And you also want ideally first aid to be able to, I say ideally, this is the minimum, you have to have it, is got to be a relevant first aid certificate. And that costs a certain amount to keep up every 2 to 3 years. The insurance for a forest school, depending on what they operate on and their operating costs and how many people work there, can be over £200 to £400, depending on what sort of sessions they run. So insurance, training. So I use my numbers. My numbers are really high for this, and I basically halved them, which gives us about £6 per session. Now, of course, this is fantastic. You have a forest school leader, you have them planned and prepared, they have the insurance, they have the training, they have all of that. Now comes possibly your biggest cost. You need somewhere to run the session. Venue hire is massive. It is a big cost, but it also varies a lot. You can essentially get places for peppercorn rent, but if you're looking for somewhere that has a good amount of facilities, so has toilets on site or running water, or is just in a really nice location, even if the upfront costs are low, the back end costs are going to be bigger. So the cost to a venue isn't just owning the land, it's also about maintaining it. It's about getting those tree surveys in to make sure that none of the big trees are going to drop on children. It's about clearing up storm damage. It's about maintaining structures and shelters. It's about maintaining insurance for that land, so that if a branch or tree drops on someone, there's all sorts of costs associated. The wildlife surveys, it goes on and on. So a very conservative £30 per day is what I'm going to put there, but it can vary from 15 to 60 easily, and that's just the variation that I have within the venues that I hire. Some of them can be more expensive depending on the facilities you have available. Okay, onwards. So you've got, as I said, you've got your qualified person that's planned and prepared, has insurance training, has a venue. At the moment, they've only got sticks to rub together and not much else. And a very minimum, you want a forest leader to have a first aid kit. They may well need to have a fire pit. There may well need to be an axe to drop firewood. You're going to want things to extend learning. You maybe want fire steels, everything else, and you might want some sawhorses, some seating, and that's where the equipment costs come in, and they can be significant. So care and maintain, even if you're just maintaining a trolley, replacing the tires on it and all that, it adds up. And if you are a site, if you run on lots of pop-up sites, you need transportation from that, and that will likely mean a van or larger car than you would normally have for just yourself. So I've grouped equipment and transport together, and this is a low number for me. It might be a mid to slightly higher number for other people, but this is all of the costs of maintaining a van in terms of insurance, tax, MOT, service, the whole shebang. It's a lot higher if you're using it for business use. So equipment and transport altogether, I'm very conservative on this. My numbers are way higher than that because I usually invest in good quality equipment, and I look for things that will last and tools that will do the right job. Okay, so we've got equipment, but if you want to do any sort of craft activities or offer some biscuits or hot chocolate or marshmallows, or if you want to have a fire and not completely strip your wood of firewood, unless you have a large site, you're not going to be self-sufficient for firewood. And anyway, that's a lot of work to cut that and split it and dry it and everything else. So with that, consumables for food, drink, everything else, that's going to work out to about £7 per day. As I said, can be higher, can be lower. That's on the low side for what I do. So I'm trying to stay low where I can to make this as realistic as possible. Now, if you are self-employed, there are so many other costs that you will incur that can't really be summed up in any of the rest. And it's stuff like accounting, because you need to do your own accounts at the end of the year. So you either need accounting software, or unless you're really good with spreadsheets, you'll need an accountant, and you need to keep track of all of that. If they're running directly to private individuals, which a lot of people are, like I do myself, then there's marketing costs. So that's maintaining a booking site. It might be writing ads, printing off leaflets. There's a lot of other overheads at play. Things that you wouldn't think of, like maybe signs for around your forest school, branded kit for people, just all to bring the people in. So there's a lot of other overheads, and they are essential if you want to have a successful forest school. So when we look at all of this together, we have our self-employed qualified employee on 128 a day. He needs a plan. They need a planning of preparation day, half a day there, so that's 192. We add in insurance, our venue, equipment and transports, consumables, marketing overheads with very conservative numbers. That brings us down to £261 for a day of forest school. So this is what that qualified individual needs to get to be able to basically keep a roof over their head and everything else. Now, if we are really stingy and we go, okay, you know what, forest school leaders, they don't really deserve anything above minimum wage, then we can go, okay, that would come out to £237. So that's 15%. So it's removing that 15% for all of the work they put into a degree and the forest school portfolio and everything. Forest school training is big. It takes close to 2 years to complete. It's a massive amount of work. Portfolio is a nightmare in terms of workload. It's easily the biggest thing that I've ever done. So yeah, that will still bring us out to 237. So this is the amount that a forest school leader has to make from their sessions, like top level revenue. And this is where things really start to break down, because a lot of the forest schools that I see around, they want to serve the people, and they want to keep costs as low as possible. But when you start looking at it, so if you look at, if say they charge £5 per child on average, how many children would they need over the course of a day to meet that £261 figure? Well, that would be 52 children, or that's 26 children per session. Now that's a lot. That's a lot for one person. But it doesn't get very much better if we raise the price to £7.50. Then we do only need to get 34 children in, but that is again £16, 16 children per, sorry, I'm doing the maths wrong there, 17 children per session. Okay, so that's quite a large amount. So if we looked at it another way, let's pop this there. So we have our 2-hour session, which is nice to have. So that would be 120 minutes divided by 17 children. That means each child gets 7 minutes with the leader, assuming that the leader doesn't have other things they need to do, like look after the fire, check on a first aid problem, or supervise another child. They get 7 minutes, and it gets even worse if, of course, we look at 26 per session. There we get about 4.5 minutes per child. You can see this is not ideal for the outcomes that we want from forest school. I mean, it's occupying children, it's taking them out, but there's really not a lot of safety. You can't run a good quality session. You can't do a lot of one-to-one work with tools and fires, this group, all on your own. So of course the obvious thing is, well, let's get in an assistant. And even though we've seen that our self-employed minimum wage, a lot of assistants are contracted rather than employed. You can see even at our 112, if we're really stingy or find other ways to pay them, we can say, okay, we'll just pay you 100. And I know this is difficult point. So we pay £100 for assistant, and let's see what the numbers look like. So that will be 361 including assistant. So that means at £5 we would need 72 children. At £7.50 we would need 48 children. And that starts getting really bad, because that's still 35, 36. That's 36 per session, and that's 24 per session. Those are almost full classes, and this would be just with one extra assistant. There's just not a lot of time to be able to spend with them. So that's doable, but you really have to be going to a school to get those kind of amounts. You're not going to be able to get that in a private session, because keeping and maintaining those 72 children coming in every day, day after day, it's going to take a lot of marketing, in which case it'll eat into the time that you can deliver. But let's go back to our minimum wage for a school leader. Let's see what the numbers look like. So at £5 per child without an assistant, we can get 47 children over the course of the day, and 31 children respectively. So not a massive saving. So about 3 to 5 children either way. And then we can see again for 72 children, at £5 with an assistant, we need 67 children. That's massive. And at £7.50, it's 44 children. So it's only when we start getting over the £10 mark that things start looking better, and we start getting to 26 children there. And over here, we would have 36 children with an assistant, which again, it's whatever, 18 children per session. It's getting too manageable. With an assistant, that's okay. 13 children on your own, that's pretty close to where I'm at, and that's doable. So it's only when you start getting over that £10 amount that all of the maths starts making sense. Those numbers don't look particularly good, but it's worth remembering that that does not include anything to do with cancellation of sessions. So if the session leader has to cancel the session due to high winds, thunderstorms, really cold temperatures, problems with ice on the road, snow, whatever, that leader won't get paid for that, and they'll be dropped off their monthly amount. We also don't take into account any future investment in business, so there's no opportunities to buy a solo stove or a fireless or a smokeless fire pit. There's no money set aside to kind of offer scholarships to children that may need it. So offering some parents who can't afford even the small amounts to be able to allow them in as well. There's a lot missing, and it's not even talking about tax, but that's a whole different discussion. And I think that actually there are tax advantages to being self-employed. There are ways to structure your business, so it does save you a bit more money. So, but there's just such a lot, and it just doesn't add up. And I think a lot of leaders in their heart know this, but they are still carrying on running the sessions because they believe in what they do. But as an industry, when people are paid under minimum wage for doing work, it's not going to attract the forerunners in a field. It's not going to attract people for long term. You're not going to have sustainable and professional population of leaders. So okay, I hope this has given you some food for thought. I'm still working my way through the income survey, so look out for the results on that in the near future. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Remember to make the most of every day, and I'll see you all next time.